Thank you all for joining us today. My name is Katrina E., and I'm an evaluator on the evaluation and research team here at CATCA, and I help to manage this program. So today we are going to be going over the 2023 Blue Ribbon application process. You might have also known this as the Got Outcomes Awards. And we're really just going to go over some different, go over the requirements and processes. And then we also have our 2022 Got Outcomes winners, who are lovely panelists for today to just give you a little bit more insight and tips on their own experience. So from our Coalition in Focus, we have Lydia Fuquay with Engage Douglas County, just a little wave. Coalition of Excellence, we have Leslie Gable with Partnership for Health Drug-Free Task Force. And then, of course, last but not least, Coalition of the Year, Julie Fern with Jackson County Prevention Coalition. And so you'll be hearing a little bit more from them towards the end. And if you do have any specific questions for them, please go ahead and put them in the Q&A box so that we can take a look at those. Okay. Oops. Sorry, I'm just moving some things around. So I want to go ahead and start off with just a brief history about, Got Outcomes and our transition into the Blue Ribbon application process. So for the past 19 years, Got Outcomes has recognized exceptional community coalitions that effectively contribute to alcohol, tobacco, and other drug use misuse prevention. This application process has had many iterations over the years, and it used to be a lot lengthier. You were creating completely new documents. It was a 25+ page application, which is very, very hefty. And overall, we just didn't think it made sense to have to recreate these documents. And so instead of reinventing the wheel, we created a system that would be more synergistic to coalition's efforts. And so since 2019, we, aligned the application process to what is exactly taught at the National Coalition Academy. This allows coalitions to submit products that they've already created during the NCA, and it encourages them to continuously update their products and utilize them past the NCA as a foundation for their work within their community. In addition to those changes, we continue to increase our coalition development support and feedback that we're able to provide from year to year. That includes feedback reports and proactive calls to really go through any improvements that can be made. This process also helps with our different trainings and resources. And of course, in 2021, we had a new addition, which was the Blue Ribbon Coalition Recognition, which is that special recognition for coalitions who are utilizing and updating their products, because we still want to make sure that they are recognized for their hard work, even if they might not receive an award. And so this year, we did want to transition into the Blue Ribbon application process to really focus on this ability to become a Blue Ribbon coalition and how this can help you in your coalition's work. And so, becoming a Blue Ribbon coalition, it is a 2-year recognition that you would need to reapply through this process after that 2 years is up. And you can become one by moving on to phase 2 of this application process. Now, the prominence of this new recognition was initially demonstrated during CATCA's 2022 National Leadership Forum through the support of Dr. Rahul Gupta, Director of National Drug Control Policy. Also that year, a lot of the coalitions were gaining a lot of visibility with their legislators during Capitol Hill Day, and speaking to this recognition that they had achieved. And even just this year, there was one coalition who set up an award ceremony within their own community that had their mayor and a couple of their really supportive partners. And they actually had General Price from CATCA join. And so that was a nice little a nice little piece for them to really recognize their community, recognize their coalition, and things like that. And so overall, it's a great vehicle to advance and showcase your coalition's work. And so these are all of our coalitions that we have so far from the past 2 years. There's 34 coalitions, and they've all been really, really fantastic. So maybe one day you guys will be on this as well. All right, so diving into the actual application. So looking at the awards, I've already mentioned the Blue Ribbon Coalition. Moving on to phase 2 of the application process, there's that. And then for the actual Blue Ribbon Awards, we have our Coalition in Focus, which is our short-term outcomes of 6 to 24 months. There is our Coalition of Excellence, looking at short-term and intermediate, around 1 to 4 years. And then Coalition of the Year, looking at all across short-term, intermediate, and long-term outcomes, which can range from 3 to 10 years. And so you'd be able to select which award category you would really be focusing on. So one of those Blue Ribbon Awards. And then, like I said, the Blue Ribbon Coalition recognition would just be if you move on to phase 2, no matter which award category you apply for. So in this very first phase of the application process, there are the coalition products that you will be submitting. So these are the same products that you've learned about and developed during the National Coalition Academy. So we have our community assessment, logic model, strategic and action plan, evaluation communication plan, and your sustainability plan. So all the plans. In addition to that, we do require a description of your coalition outcomes because that is a part of it. We want to see how you've applied your coalition products to achieve positive change within your community. And so we want to have a clear picture of those outcomes and, of course, making sure that you have the supporting data points to show that development. If you aren't familiar with NCA and with these products, we also will have templates and also the scoring rubric online as a guide. And it doesn't have to look exactly like the templates as long as all of the required content is there. Once we get through phase 1, phase 2 looks more like showcasing those different outcomes that you're able to achieve. So the first part of that would be a short 10 to 15 slide presentation, really telling your coalition story, the thought process, the steps taken, the different activities and strategies that were implemented to get to those outcomes. And then we also have the infographic as the second part, which is more of a quick and easy way to lay out the information in an appealing and eye-catching way. And so depending on the infographics audience, it can be shared throughout your community. Now, these 2 products were very intentional requirements since both of these can be repurposed to share your story with different stakeholders, coalition members, or your community. And so we want to be able to have that laid out for you. So looking at the awards and the different requirements, we are only going to focus on one substance use issue, there we go, that you've showed, success in and what you'd like to highlight on this application. From there, you'll identify which award category you'd like to apply for, which is either, do you have short-term outcomes, intermediate, or long-term? I think that will help guide you on which one might be appropriate. And then, of course, making sure that you have that submitted on time with those coalition products, that description of coalition outcomes, and then also completing an online application form. Now, looking at the rubric. So this is just a breakdown of each product and how many points are allotted for each. You'll notice that the logic model and strategic and action plan have a few more points than the other sections just because of how integral and foundational those products are for everything else that you guys will be doing. And so that's why we've kind of added more points into those sections. But overall, it totals up to 100 points. And like I mentioned, this rubric will be something that you will have access to. And so always, always, always recommend for you guys to look through that. This is just a little preview of what the rubric actually looks like. And so in this blue box, you'll have the specific requirements that you want to have included in that section. In this next one, these are the scores that will be used. So you'll get a 0 through 4, and these are the different ratings and information for each one. And then finally, just looking in this purple box, all of these scores are going to be weighted. And so, you know, if you get a 4, obviously you get the full amount of points that are allotted. Or if you get a 3, you get 80% of those points that were allotted, and so forth. So when you are looking at this rubric, it should auto-calculate for you. Or if not, just take a look or email me about that. Now, one thing that I do want to focus on a little bit today is really mapping out the outcomes to the logic model. So based off of your award category that you are applying for, your outcomes should be tied very closely to your logic model. And so if you are getting a coalition and focus, you know, we're looking at those short-term outcomes. And so what that translates to is that we want to see what one local condition is. We want to see the baseline data piece for that local condition, and then of course 1 to 2 pieces of follow-up data to show a trend. And so we really just want you to focus on one local condition and the supporting data. For Coalition of Excellence, there are 2 ways that you can go about this. The first one is looking at just one root cause, and then the 2 local conditions that are attached to those. Once again, making sure that you have the supporting data and that trend data to show change over time. Or this is the second way you can go about it. You can have one root cause and then one linking local condition, and then you can have a second root cause with one linking local condition. I know it gets a little bit confusing, but hopefully this visually will translate and help you as you're determining which pieces of information that you need. Now, Coalition of the Year is pretty similar to that previous one, but we are just kind of adding in, of course, the problem, which is the long-term outcomes that you're trying to achieve. So in option A, you have your problem to one root cause with those 2 local conditions, or you can take this route. We have the problem. There is one root cause with one local condition, and then a second root cause with one local condition. And so definitely take a look at these a little bit more closely, see what data that you have to support this. Once again, we really stress this connection between the data that you have in your local condition or in your logic model and how that ties into your ability to track those data pieces over time to show those trends. And so this kind of goes into this last slide that I have. So displaying your outcomes and looking at your trend data, this is something that would really be focused on that outcomes description that I had mentioned. And so this is a little snippet of what our template looks like. So for the award category they select, please insert a table or a graph of the baseline data and follow-up data trend points. And then of course, also including a short descriptive statement about the data and the outcomes achieved. So if we wanted to do short-term outcomes, looking at 6 to 24 months, we would need one baseline and 1 to 2 follow-up data points. So in this blue example here, this is the local condition that we've chosen. High school age youth attend off-campus parties near the ABC college campus where alcohol is accessible. And so that's the local condition. And now we have either a chart or table or a graph to kind of display those data pieces for this local condition. So you'll notice here, there is the 65%, which is the baseline in 2016, 62 in 2018, and 52 in 2020. So baseline, data point 1, data point 2. And then here on the right is just more of a visual graph to show that same pieces, those same pieces of information. And so either one of these would be great for you guys to display the data points that you have in the outcomes document. So looking at some other helpful reminders, I know I just spoke about looking at your logic model to outcomes, but just remember you still need to complete and submit a full logic model based off of your award category. Something that could be helpful for your graders is also just marking which outcomes you are highlighting in this application. So in this case, we have one root cause and 2 local conditions highlighted so that it's an easy reference for our graders to be like, okay, yes, these are the ones that they're trying to highlight. Let's find the relevant information for these different parts. Some other reminders for your community assessment. Please make sure you're including all your data. The community assessment should have all of your data in there already, not just the ones that are on your logic model. For your strategic and action plan, we are looking at both goal 1, which is increasing community collaboration, and goal 2, reduce youth substance use and misuse. So make sure you're including both of those. We want to make sure that you guys are regularly updating and renewing these products. And so the most recent data that you have is usually going to be the best material for you to use. And then if you are updating it this year, hopefully it'll be easier to update next year as well. And then the final one, which I've already talked about, is please make sure you're using the grading rubric. This will tell you exactly what the graders are looking for. And I will also be touching on how you can get some additional support in just a few slides. So why should you participate? I mean, first off, the opportunity to become a Blue Ribbon Coalition. It's in the name now. But also you'll be able to get a lot of in-depth feedback about your coalition's products so that you can continue to improve them and update them and have a foundation for your coalition's work moving forward. There is going to be free coalition development support to enhance your products both before submission and after. And then also there's the ability to, or opportunity to participate in the Ideas Fair poster presentation at the National Leadership Forum next year. As for those who become Blue Ribbon Award winners, there'll be recognition across all of CADCA communication, joining in on a session at the National Leadership Forum to really go over, your thought processes and your strategies and the outcomes to share with other coalitions. Of course, you'll get an award, and there is the opportunity for coalition leaders to be considered for CADCA training or leadership opportunities. And so moving on from that, I want to go ahead and move into our panelist discussion. And so I have a couple questions here that I'd like to start off with. And then if anyone has any other questions for the panelists, please go ahead and put them in the Q&A box. But I'll go and start. First question, and I'll let this be whoever wants to speak first. But what steps did you take to complete this application?
I'm laughing, we all unmute at the same time. All right, go ahead, Julie. Oh, okay. So for us, it was taking out all of the products, making sure they were up to date, having the coalition look at them, making sure they knew what was in them and had some ownership of those documents. And then, you know, I think for us, it was really looking back at our outcomes. We tend to look at our outcomes based on grants and whatever grant period, but we went back for the whole life of our coalition, which is a first for us, and looked at our outcomes. And then we were able to like see them in a new light and celebrate them in our application.
The one thing that we did that I think was really helpful is we put together a committee that were members of our coalition team. And we kind of, even though we all worked on pieces together as a team, we also divided and conquered, which helped as far as making sure we're gathering all the information we needed. That to me, approaching it in a team environment was, it was really helpful, especially when you have, if you come across some areas that you have some difficulties, you have people that can help be supportive and also make sure that we're all seeing it through the same lens. So I felt that that was a good way to do this process.
Our process was very similar to what Julie and Leslie described. We utilized the products that we created during the National Coalition Academy, and we were pretty fresh off of that experience, so it was easy to dust them off. And we worked to complete those initial updates and then shared them, similar to what Leslie said, with a small committee for review and feedback. And we relied very heavily on the scoring rubric as a way to check our work as we went, to make sure that it aligned with the application requirements.
All right, perfect. Thank you guys so much. Next question. How has the application process influenced your coalition's work as you're doing it and maybe even after now?
I'll go ahead and start on this one.
So for our coalition, we've been a coalition for about 15 years. And I think people, when we looked long-term and like actually presented our long-term outcomes, it kind of reinforced the work they've been doing. It reignited the fire for a lot of our people. It really gave us in the community some street credibility that, hey, we've been here, we're doing really good work. Here's some outcomes that our community has shown. I know that we can't claim them, but we certainly hope we're part of them. And it's just a validation for the people in the community and just everyone that prevention does work and the coalition does matter.
I think just building off of what Julie had to say, because that's absolutely the same for us. I think one of the things that kind of ties into Katrina, your next question, when we went through this application process, some of the areas that we found a little bit more challenging kind of also reflected to us in our process going forward, things we needed to change. Making sure, for example, our data collection systems that were always ongoing. I think that's also helped influence the importance of having this information, not just because you're going through an application, but because you should be having and checking your evaluation system as you're going, right? And so that has really influenced us in the work that we do. I think the other area that I'd like to point out for folks that are maybe considering this, sometimes some of your greatest things that you learn might not necessarily be in being awarded the application, but going through this process really helped emphasize not just having these products kind of in a filing cabinet, back I'm kind of dating myself with a filing cabinet, but or in an online folder, but making sure that you bring them out and you're using them as part of your ongoing coalition work. And I think sometimes I can tell you I've been part of this process for many years. And I could say sometimes it's the years we didn't win that really kind of made us focus on strengthening some of our systems. So if you're thinking about it, I strongly encourage it.
That's a great point, Leslie. The only other thing I could think to add is that it really helped us, it afforded us the chance to think about how we tell our story as a coalition. We're fairly new. We've only been around since 2019, and we're still working to build that awareness of our existence, in the county. So working through the application process really allowed us to practice sharing our story to determine, what sticks, what resonates with our community.
No, I think that's really great, Lydia. Thank you for bringing that point up. Next question. So what difficulties did you face during the application process, and how were you able to overcome those? Julie, I think you're muted. I see you speaking, but
Okay, thank
there
you.
you go.
When we were gathering our data to do the long-term look back, making sure that the data over time, like the questions asked on surveys hadn't changed, that we were comparing apples to apples. Because we know we use a lot of our state survey data, and those questions have changed over time. And so that became a challenge. Different people, different places, getting all the data and pulling it together. We had it, but could we find it, and could we put it together in a very usable, consumable piece for the community? There is it is a process, and there is some work to it, and it's, sharing that work, and it's not just a project coordinator sitting in an office doing it themselves, or a coalition director. I think were the difficulties that we addressed.
I think some of our difficulties is taking all the things that we do and narrowing it down to making sure, I think, Katrina, to your point with your logic model, and going, okay, well, wait, we did this, which is following, which is able to, and then talking about Lydia said, how do you tell your story in the best way with the things that we've done, tying it to the data and the evaluation. And we had to kind of go through this a few different ways of making sure that we had ways to tell and demonstrate through an evaluation process. So that's kind of sometimes it was a little bit difficult sometimes, kind of trying to get all of us. And that's what's so great about having a group of you working together to make sure that what's clear to one is clear to all. Because if you're putting this forward, and again, goes back to both what Julia and Lydia are talking about, is really communicating the story. And how do you do it where it's clear for anyone that's picking up a document or a flyer, or anything that you do, right? And so, and that's an ongoing, by the way, this is ongoing. It wasn't just this kind of one-time snap. So I think that was an area that still challenging sometimes today for us.
I agree. We experienced a very similar circumstance. There are a lot of pieces involved in the application process. So just logistically keeping track of those pieces, who had eyes on them, who had provided feedback on them, whether they were updated and ready to submit, was a little dicey at times. So having a process in place for how to keep track of all the pieces and make sure they're ready to rock and roll can be a challenge.
All right. So last question. What's one piece of advice you would give to potential applicants?
I would encourage people to take advantage of the coalition development support that is available. I think we do this every day, and we sometimes are so ingrained with what we know. Having a fresh set of eyes look at it is really helpful. And the CADCA people are super knowledgeable and helpful. And I would always take up any opportunity that comes for that kind of coalition development support.
Julie, that's a really good piece of advice, and definitely support and agree with that for sure. I think again, Katrina, go back to what you brought up about the rubric. The rubric really kind of lays out all the pieces, and having someone who hasn't been a part of putting the application together, to have somebody from your coalition just take it and see if they can follow through on the rubric to see if all the pieces. Again, someone who's not a part of it, sometimes coming in going, oh, you guys missed this. Sometimes it's so obvious to someone else, and you've just been working with it. So I bring someone else in to, again, help kind of give it a checks and balance for you. And if you're on the fence about applying, I strongly encourage you to apply. There's so much other things that happen along the way with our team that really help to strengthen our whole coalition process. And you get great feedback. which is really helpful. That feedback really, again, just strengthens all the work that we do.
Absolutely. I'd echo exactly what Julie and Leslie said. Don't be afraid to ask questions, reach out to the CADCA team for support. I think Julie and Leslie both said involve the coalition in every step of the process, which can sometimes be a challenge based on, schedules and availability and things, but it's so important to empower them to take ownership of the process. And the only other thing I could think of would be to give yourself plenty of time to work through each required piece of the application. Don't wait, start now, start early, and work on it often.
Yeah, thank you so much for saying that, Lydia. The deadline isn't for a couple months. And we've done that pretty intentionally to hopefully you guys can get started as soon as possible in this reviewing process, because as each of them have touched on, it is a process, unfortunately a little bit lengthy, but I think there are a lot of great benefits to going through that process, involving your coalition members, updating these products, updating some of the systems and the ways that you guys are collecting your data and bringing it all together and sharing it in the end. And so really, this whole thing is much more than just the awards that we are presenting or these recognitions. It's really being able to provide a way for us to help you guys out a little bit more and in a structured way. And so any last thoughts before we move on? I don't think I have any questions from participants. All set? All right, I'm going to go ahead and move on to some of the more details of submission and whatnot. So you are able to download the full application package through our website. It'll be on the main page if you go to this link, and you'll see a section that says application details and requirements. There'll be a button for you to download the full application package, and this will have all of the application requirements, the different steps, how to submit, and it'll also contain the different coalition product templates, especially because we want to make sure we're using the most up-to-date ones. And depending on when you last looked at your coalition products or updated them or went through the National Coalition Academy, these product templates are the ones that we're kind of basing this rubric off of. So please take a look at those. And then, of course, really important is the grading rubric. So you'll have a chance to download that for your review as you go through each of your products. Now, as we've mentioned a few times so far in this webinar, we are providing application support. And so if you have any questions just generally about some of the application requirements and submission, you can go and email blueribbon@cadca.org, and we'll be able to answer those questions. But if you're looking for more application support and feedback, please go ahead and utilize our coalition development support team. There's a couple ways you can do this. You can email them at training@cadca.org, or you can schedule an appointment with them using that link. It's a little bit long, but it should be an easy way for you to do that. Just make sure that you're including Blue Ribbon application in either of those messages, just so that they have an idea of what you're coming to them about, and so that they can provide the appropriate support for you. So yes, please use us as a reference. We are here to support, we're here to help, especially in these couple of months before the applications are due. So they aren't due until Friday, June 30th, and it must include all of these different documents that we've already talked about. So there should be 7 in total, and we'd love for you to put them all into one file and upload them into our Blue Ribbon application form, which can be found online. And then if you do have any troubles with it, once again, just go ahead and email us at blueribbon@cadca.org, and we'll make sure that your application is submitted and we have it all sorted out. So Friday, June 30th, start working out who you'd like to join you through this process in this review. And I think that hopefully these 2 months will be really worthwhile, maybe a little busy. And so this is the actual full application timeline. just to give you an idea. So you'll be able to receive feedback really right up until phase 1 applications are due on June 30th. We have about a month for graders to review these applications. And then sometime in August, late August, we'll notify about the phase 2 portions. And then phase 2 will start up in September 22nd and so forth and so on. But this is all on our website for you guys to access. Once again, cadca.org, 2023 Blue Ribbon Coalitions. And if you have any questions, please go to blueribbon@cadca.org. And then thank you, Julie, for answering one of the questions. Our applications open every year or every 2 years. It is definitely every year. So we do have this open. If you do receive a Blue Ribbon Coalition designation, you're still welcome to, apply the following year if you'd like, just to kind of continue to get that improvement piece. But you wouldn't really have to apply until 2 years. And so I have another question by Stephanie. Why does there need to be a phase 2? So the phase 2 part, the reason why we have 2 phases, the first one is really just looking at those foundational products and looking at the overall outcomes. The phase 2 is really the opportunity to craft what you found through your foundational products and the outcomes and develop it into a story that you're able to communicate towards your community members, your stakeholders, and those sorts of things. And so it's definitely a 2-piece process overall, because it's not enough just to have the information, the outcomes, if your community doesn't understand what you're doing or why you're doing it or how you're doing it and what you've achieved. And so they wouldn't be able to appreciate the work that you've done. And so that's why we have 2 phases. Are there any other questions that you guys would like to put into the Q&A? Oops, sorry. No? All right. Well, I want to go ahead and say thank you to our panelists for joining us today, just to give a little bit of advice and tips on this application process. And then hopefully, we'll see a lot of applications coming in for this year and a whole lot more Blue Ribbon Coalitions added to our list, because we want to continue to recognize you all in our community for all the great work and the hard work that you guys are doing. Any last words from our panelists before we say goodbye? No?
I'll throw out there.
All right, thank you guys so much.
Good luck.
These slides sorry.
I was just wishing everyone good luck with their application.
Yeah, all of this is going to be on our website, the recording and the slides, so just keep an eye out for that if you want to review. Thank you, everybody.